Hello again everybody, and the subject I'd like to think about today is looking at things from another point of view. Now there's an awful lot happening in the world at the moment that's making us rejudge things and look at things from another point of view, but I want to think about this through the lens of what happened at the end of the Trojan War. Now I've been caused to think about this partly by by reading the poetry of Ann Duffy and The World's Wife, looking at things from the point of view of some of the women of history, but also through reading the poetry of Josephine Balmer. I have a poem which I'm going to read in a little while, which is from her collection called Chasing Catullus. So, at the end of Virgil's Aeneid Book 2, the hero of the story, Aeneas, a Trojan prince, is escaping from the city which has been destroyed by the Greeks. He's going into exile, he's taking up the responsibility of the commission from the gods of going off to found a new Troy. He's taking with him his past, so he's carrying his father on his back. He's taken with him his future, which is his son, who's trotting along with unequal footsteps with his hand twined in his at the side of him. But somewhere else, somewhere beside him, somewhere behind him, is his wife Creusa. And Creusa is really the subject of my talk today. So, Creusa, when Aeneas got to his destination outside of the city, it was clear that Creusa had been lost in the panic. So what had happened to her? What happens to people who get left behind, particularly in the panic and the awfulness of war? Euripides caused us to think about this in his fantastic play, The Trojan Women. If you want to see a version of that, there's a great film, austere and very stark, but made by Michael Kakayanis. Very much commend that to you. Very moving. Hard work. It's not an easy watch at all, but a great film of a great play. But also causing us to think about what happens here is Josephine Balmer. So what I'm going to read to you now is her poem, which is just titled Creusa, and it's from this book, Chasing Catullus, by Josephine Balmer. So there are two voices in this. The first is the voice of Virgil, and that's intermingled with the voice of Creusa, which will become clear. Did she lose her way, or just stop running? Sink down to rest, unable to trace tracks? We don't know. We never saw her again. I didn't even look back, but when all regrouped, this one was missing. Comrades, husband, son, sharing the same loss. I went home, hoping she'd do the same, hoping. It was seething, shuddering with Greeks like rats. Now I shook too, frightened by the quiet, but somehow in the dusk I found courage, called out to my wife again and again, filling the streets with the sound of her name. If the city was an ancient ruin, hacked by farmer's axe deep in forest, trembling, teetering, threatening, and then at last uprooted with thundering groan, I was the hair in its lengthening shadow, racing on and on, running down darkness until at last the light was all but gone. Through the gloom, ghosted, I saw Aeneas, heard him call, but it was as if he was fading fast. Faint mountain echo, tried to speak, but it was as if my voice was mud, words crumbled into dust. She told me not to grieve for what was lost. All that had passed was the will of the gods. We weren't meant to travel on together. Ahead I faced exile, vast seas to cross. The joy of all things, new lands now, new loves, fresh hopes for a future in the making. Yet begged me to cherish the sun we'd shared. Then she was gone, vanished into thin air. 3 times in vain I tried to embrace her. 3 times I sensed her wraith escaping, like clouds dispersed or a dream on waking. I didn't know what I might be saying. I thought he'd put a finger to my lips the way he did when Eulus stirred in sleep and I saw this fever or that illness, laughing away my terrors as he could. I half hoped he'd throw his arms around me, promise that he'd stay, always had, always would. I watched as he took up his gods and shrine, set his aging father on his shoulder, wrap our son's hand in his, in miniature, walk towards the hills through the blackened vines. It was then I knew I'd been left behind. Now, if you just read Virgil, Creusa, emotional though his description of that scene is, when Aeneas goes back to try and find her and her ghost appears and she says, "No, I'm dead, you need to go on without me." It's almost as if it's an afterthought. It's as if Virgil has thought, "Oh, I'd better tie that loose end up." And he needs to leave Aeneas free to marry Lavinia when eventually he gets to Italy. But that poem brilliantly, I think, causes us to think about what it was like from the point of view of Creusa. What does this have to say to us today? Well, first, lots of things are forcing us to think about things from new angles. The current events are causing us to think about people and what their value really is. Who are the people who really matter? And finally, we all need to be open to rethinking many things that we have until now taken for granted.